Uluslararası Eğitim Haftası etkinliklerimizden olan webinarımıza hoş geldiniz. Bugün Ordu'daki İngilizce öğretim asistanı Hailey Hesseltine bizimle ve Amerika'da eğitimle ilgili e, deneyimlerini, görüşlerini, ayrıca kendisi bu konuda master, yüksek lisans yapmış birisi olduğu için alan bilgisini de paylaşıyor olacak. Ben kendisine şimdiden çok teşekkür ediyorum bize katıldığı için. And I'm leaving the floor to you, Hailey.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for signing up for this presentation. I hope to give you some more information about studying in the US, what it's like to be in the US a little bit, and to answer any questions you have. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I will get started with this presentation. So if you give me 1 second. Okay, perfect. So yes, like I said, today is about studying in the US. I'm going to talk about an overview of the higher education system, a bit about different graduate programs in the US, and just what it's like studying at these universities. I tried to include all of my own pictures from my educational experiences in this slideshow. So this first one is actually at Harvard. I did not go to Harvard, but I was visiting Boston one day and I thought their campus was beautiful. So this is an example of a really nice college campus in the US. But yes, so my name is Hailey Hesseltine. I am from the US, so I am originally from Texas. I grew up there. Fort Worth is from around Dallas. I am sure most of you have heard of Dallas. But I actually lived in Honolulu, Hawaii for 2 years. I did my master's degree out there, so I do have experience in graduate school myself. My backgrounds are both in psychology and education, so I have degrees in both areas. I love school, so I keep getting degrees. But my backgrounds are in international higher education. I specialized my graduate research on international students coming to the US to study, so hopefully all of you will be in that case. But I also have background in access for low-income students or students that are searching for funding opportunities to fund their education. But currently, I'm affiliated with Fulbright as an English teaching assistant in Ordu. I work at the Hazırlık here at Ordu University, so I have experience with college students here as well. This is a picture of me from 2019, actually, at my undergraduate university. So I've been connected to Turkey for a while. I love Turkey. Happy to talk about it in another in another meeting. But yeah, so just what we're going to cover today, I'm going to try and cover a lot in a short amount of time. But first, to give you an overview of our higher education system structure, then talk a little bit more about the graduate school experience, what the learning environments are like in US education, and just a few highlights from US culture. So I want you to put in the chat right now, just so I can kind of know the information to talk about in this presentation. What are you most curious about regarding studying in the US? What do you want to know? I will give you a moment to share. I think I might have to leave my full screen to see the chat. Maybe, oh no, I have the chat here. So what are you curious about? And while y'all type, this is a picture actually. I just graduated in May. A little cultural education when I was in Hawaii. When you graduate, they give you these flowers around your neck. They're called lei. And usually they're used for celebrations. So not just graduation, but this was a very exciting day for me. So I got a lot of leis, which is nice. Okay. Are post-alumni eligible for funding in the US for higher education? Okay, that is a good one. That is a good one. Which universities are best for fine arts? Okay, so we're getting university recommendations, right? There are lots of universities in the US, actually, so many different fine arts programs. So I would just say for that question, I'll go back to the first question in a second. Honestly, I would just encourage you to research the places you want to live and maybe researching the top universities for fine arts. There's lots of different types of fine arts if you're looking for more like acting, music, actual like the doing of art, right? So we have tons of universities in the US for that. So I just encourage you to do some research. I don't have a list of the top ones in my head, but we do have so many universities in the US. Post-alumni eligible for fundings in the US. Post-alumni, if you could specify more what you're talking about, I can come back to that question later. And maybe this might be a Fulbright question that they might be able to answer. I'm not sure, but if you could specify a little bit of that, I can come back to your question later. But if you have more questions throughout the meeting, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be trying to check them periodically. But okay, so I'm going to move on. So the higher education structure in the US, we've got 4 main education programs. They differ a little bit from the Turkish system towards the beginning, but overall they're generally the same. So our undergraduate programs, we have both associate's and bachelor's degree. Something that I think is unique to the US and some other countries is this idea of community colleges or junior colleges. They give out 2-year degrees, and these are called associate's degrees. So if you ever hear anyone talking about them, they're typically your core classes you would take for a bachelor's degree. It's usually the first 2 years. So it's everything outside of your department, like general math, general science, English, history, those basic courses. Students usually enroll in these colleges because they are a little more affordable, and they offer a variety of different programs, even vocational programs. So vocational programs being stuff like electricians or plumbers, car mechanics, hairdressers, and so forth. There's lots of different vocational programs at these institutions too. Not every student attends these first. It's not a requirement in the US, but to save a little money, a lot of students will enroll in these institutions. International students actually enroll in these colleges as well, because again, they usually offer a more affordable program for students, and they're a really great starting point for students who are just beginning their higher education journey. Bachelor's degrees, so these are your 4-year undergraduate degrees. These are probably what some of you might be working on right now at your universities. So you can choose your major, you take both the core classes in your department, and typically those are completed in 4 years in the US. They're also offered at all institutions, whether they be public or private. In the US, there's not really like big distinctions between public or private institutions. Public colleges are usually a little more on the affordable side, which is why a lot of students usually go to those. But private schools do offer a lot of financial aid opportunities for students since they are aware of how expensive they can be. But yeah, so we have lots of different types of institutions, and I would say there's not really a difference between public and private schools as much in the US. But for the focus of this presentation, kind of moving forward, we have our graduate degree programs. These consist of lots of different types of programs, but mainly master's and doctoral programs, which I will talk a little bit about later. But the length of these programs really vary depending on the school that you're at, what field you're in, and so forth. These are also offered at the same public and private institutions. Most colleges that offer 4-year bachelor's degrees will also be offering graduate level degrees as well. So you can pretty much go to any university of your choosing in the US to get a master's or a doctoral degree. And we also have postgraduate degrees or postdoctoral programs, and these are for the people that really love their field. You can finish your PhD, and if you still have research in a certain area you're wanting to look at, maybe you want to specialize in training in a certain area for a few months or so, there's also postgraduate degree opportunities after you conclude your doctoral program. To see something in the chat. Alrighty, I'm going to come back to that question in a little bit. I'm going to forward this to you. Maybe you might have information on this question while I am talking. It will not let me copy and paste. The question is, Irem, it says, I am a flex program alumnus continuing my bachelor's degree in Turkey as an international student. I was wondering if alumni are eligible to apply for programs like Fulbright. So if you don't mind answering that while I continue this, or if you wanted to talk about it.
Of course. So I can explain it in Turkish, I guess.
Sure.
Şöyle ki eğer Flex programın şartı nedeniyle J1 vizesi aldıysanız 2 sene J1 home residency kuralını yerine getirdikten sonra yüksek lisans kursuna başvurabilirsiniz. Yes, we basically to be short, it's just like if they're under J1 visa with the flex program, and if they complete 2 year home residency requirement of the J1 visa, they are more than welcome to apply for the master's grant.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, with the J1 visa, there's that home requirement for sure. So yeah, as long as you meet that, then it sounds like you should be fine to apply for Fulbright programs. So good question. I hope that clarified things for you. So moving on, talking a little bit more about these graduate programs. So master's programs, these are pretty popular after you finish your 4 years bachelor's degree. Typically, most people complete a master's program before going into a doctoral program, though it is not impossible to go straight into a doctoral program. I personally always recommend students to start with a master's first, just to kind of get a taste for what the research environment is like, to see if you would like to continue your education into a PhD. But there are 2 different types of master's programs. You have your traditional academic masters, which are going to be more like masters of science degrees, masters of arts degrees. And then kind of more newer, there are not as new, but newer than these academic ones are professional level degrees. So these are going to be things like my degree, it's a master's in education. There's masters in business administration, so MBAs, and so forth. There's lots of different types of professional degrees, and they focus sometimes a little less on the research side of things, but you're still going to be learning those important research skills. Typically in the US, these programs last 1 to 2 years if you're a full-time student. And what a full-time student means is usually you're taking about 3 classes per semester. And each class is usually about 3 credit hours. So it really just depends again on your program, what you're studying. I've seen some programs that are advertised as just 1 year programs. I've known people that are doing their master's programs for 3 years. So it really just depends on if you're taking full-time course loads, if you're in a more rigorous program that might need a little more time, and so forth. But coursework typically consists of core classes in the department. So these are usually more introductory courses. Then you usually can take electives. My department was cool because I got to take electives outside of the education department. So I got to take some additional coursework in psychology because I was still interested in it. I took a Hawaiian culture class, which was really cool, and it counted as an elective for my master's program. So typically there's some flexibility in there. And then for a master's program, you typically will write a thesis or a capstone. What a capstone is a project. These are becoming more popular in master's programs in the US. I actually did a capstone instead of a traditional thesis, and these are usually a little more flexible as to what they look like. I did kind of more a traditional research study, but I've seen people, they wrote chapters for books. They formed a community-based project in education and wrote a paper about it. So typically master's programs in the US are a little more flexible with what you can do with your final paper or your final thesis. But of course, traditional thesis options still do exist. And these programs are typically 30 to 36 credit hours. So if each class is about 3 credit hours, you're looking at taking about 10 to 12 classes to complete your master's degree. So this will really allow you to become a little bit more of an expert in your field. The job market is competitive everywhere in the world, as we know, and having a master's program, it's really nice because it doesn't take that much more extra time, I would say, but it gives you such a big competitive edge as you're looking for jobs, as you're looking to get some more opportunities professionally. But like I said earlier, it also kind of gives you a beginning space to learn more about research and conducting your own research to see if maybe that is a career path you would also want to go to in the future. So like I said, it is a good way to prepare us potentially for doctoral programs. This is something that I am currently thinking about. I also see a thing in the chat. Okay, just you're welcome. You're welcome. So doctoral programs, again, these are kind of split into academic and professional. So again, your traditional academic programs are your PhDs or your doctorate in philosophy. Professional programs, again, there's so many different types of programs, but just to highlight a few, the EDD is a doctor in education. MD is like your actual doctors, like helping you when you go to the doctor's office and you're sick. JDs, these are going to be people that are working in law. DBAs, that is a doctoral or a doctor in business administration and so forth. So there's lots of specialized programs besides just your traditional PhD, though I would still say PhD is probably the most popular route. Now, PhDs can take a various amount of time. If you ask anyone who does a PhD program, it's always like, when are you going to finish? I don't know. So they do take a variable amount of time, but I would say they typically take between 4 to 7 years. 4 years, I would say that is someone who is full-time PhD, not working, not doing any other side things. So I would probably say if you're thinking about a PhD, definitely budget more than 4 years. Typically with my friends and colleagues that have done them, I would say maybe 5 to 6 years is usually a better estimate of how long it would take you to complete one of these programs. It just also depends on your field. Again, there are so many variables here, but this is just your average range. Doctoral programs, they typically consist of usually about 2 or so years of coursework. So you're going to be taking, again, maybe some core classes, maybe some electives, whatever your department requires. Then typically there's usually some sort of comprehensive exams. These might be written, they might be oral exams, maybe a combination of both. It really depends on your field to show that you have completed your coursework successfully and that you are ready for the dissertation stage of your PhD, which is basically a giant research project, right? It is a lot more than that, but just to simplify it, you are going to be writing a lot for your dissertation. And once you are done with that and you present on that and your professors are happy, then you have earned the PhD or whichever professional doctoral degree that you're earning. So it is a lot of work. It is a full-time commitment, but doctoral programs really help you to prepare to be an expert in your field. Typically, when you do doctoral programs, you're looking for a career in academia, in research. I know in Turkey, academicians is usually the title that people that are pursuing these more academic careers are called. But they really help you to like contribute to the field, right? Because you're going to be contributing a lot of new research in whatever field that you're in. You're going to develop a lot of critical thinking skills, a lot of problem solving skills, because I will say, even at the master's level, a lot of graduate school is just sitting and thinking about a problem, right? Sitting and thinking, reading and trying to comprehend a lot of things. So you're going to develop these skills, especially if you're doing a doctoral program for a longer period of time. So if you're interested in research, in academia, working at a university potentially, or just being an expert in your field in something, these programs would be really good for you. It is a lot of work, but they are worth it. I am probably going to start one at some point, so yes, but kind of moving forward, the benefits of pursuing a degree in the US, and I would say even pursuing just a degree abroad in general, right? First, the US has a lot of educational opportunities. I think last time I looked at the numbers, there are way over 3,000 institutions of higher education in the US. So there are opportunities everywhere and anywhere you can think of. We have some of the top academic programs and research opportunities around the world. We are definitely a globally competitive country to study in. Last time I also looked at the data, there are over 1 million international students that come to study in the US each year at various levels. I'm kind of jumping to my last point, but our universities are very diverse, right? So not only like in the classroom spaces are these important to really get these diverse ideas about the topics that you are studying, but just being around campus and being in the communities. The US also even brings in a lot of students from other states at institutions. So you're getting to meet a lot of different types of Americans. Because I would say like me being from Texas, I am so different from someone that's from Hawaii, someone that's from New York, California, right? So you're going to be getting exposed to so much diversity at our institutions and so many diverse opinions and thoughts. So jumping back up to my second point, there's really good networking opportunities in the US. US institutions are really big at engaging alumni and professionals in different academic spaces. So you will always have some sort of networking opportunities accessible just at your institution. There's always a lot of opportunities in graduate school to present work at conferences, to go and meet people. I know friends that have gotten funding just to go to conferences, not even to present, and they can go talk with people at these events and network. Professors are usually also really great for networking opportunities. I'll talk a little bit more about these relationships with professors in a little bit. Career boosts. So US degrees are pretty much recognized globally. So having a degree from the US is going to be really beneficial, as you can say, hey, I studied abroad, I studied in the US, and people usually are going to recognize that as, okay, this is a credible degree. You are definitely qualified to work at my company. And again, lots of research opportunities, because the US, a lot of research in probably every field comes out of the US. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities to get specific experiences in your field that you might not find elsewhere. This is me presenting my research in graduate school. Again, these are all my photos. So funding opportunities, right? Again, the unfortunate thing about the US is school is kind of expensive, but there are so many ways you can make these opportunities accessible. Some of the best advice I got as I was looking at graduate school was don't pay for it. Don't pay for a master's, don't pay for a PhD. Someone can help you fund this because they're going to see that you are passionate about what you're doing, that you have a lot to contribute to your field. So if you can show that passion to any sort of organization, to any school, they're going to help you out. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it was the best advice that I got when I was looking at programs for my master's that I completed. So there's several ways. There are assistantships usually on campuses, and these consist of several things. So first is teaching assistantships. So basically you will apply for these to teach a college level course. I would say typically they're going to be intro level courses for bachelor's students. So let's say you are doing your master's in biology, right? They may have you teach an introductory biology class for first year bachelor's students. So, or it could be assisting in such like grading exams, maybe proctoring exams. There's lots of different things that you might be doing as a teaching assistant. Research assistantships, kind of similar, but you're not teaching, you are working with your professor on some research. So you're going to be doing research regardless if you're doing a research assistantship or not. But this is a role that allows you to work more closely with your professors on maybe some research that they're working on. Maybe if you have ideas to contribute. Research assistantships consist of a lot of things, but at the basis, you're going to get a deeper dive into what research is. And finally, fellowships and grants. It's just like Fulbright, right? There are lots of opportunities, and I would say Fulbright is probably one of the most globally recognized opportunities, both in the US and all around the world. Fulbright is everywhere, and they offer lots of great opportunities for students hoping to seek graduate level education in the US to study. And so these fellowships can also really help you out at funding, getting to the US, paying those tuition fees, everything that comes with Fulbright, and the networking opportunities are always great too. The network is great. Fulbrighters are everywhere, you will find. So there's also opportunities outside of working at the university to seek funding. I know Fulbright either has already done or is doing some webinars more on the specifics of these grants. So I definitely recommend, if those haven't happened yet, to attend those and to learn about it, because these are really great opportunities for you. So if you're worried about funding, great news, there are lots of opportunities to study abroad. So let me just check real quick. So the chat, I will come back to that. So classroom expectations. What I will say is the relationship with professors, I think, is a lot different in the US. This is actually me and one of my professors. He was my capstone advisor, so I worked with him very closely. Again, you can see the Hawaiian leis there because I was celebrating being done with my capstone. But I would say, kind of jumping ahead my point here, my last 2 points, professors are very approachable. I would say, again, the relationship with professors is a lot more casual in the US. Of course, when you first meet a professor, it's good to be formal, it's good to make a first impression, but I will say every professor in my graduate level experience has had me call them just by their first name, no titles. I had one professor who even just preferred to go by her nickname. So her name was Nicole, but we called her Coco. And I was like, okay, Coco, Professor Coco, right? So these relationships are typically a lot more casual, but they do focus a lot on mentorship. I had another advisor, her name was Erin, And she was really wonderful at walking me through, like, first just basic things like registering for my classes, talking about my goals in the program, but really being intentional on meeting with me, checking in with me. It's not unusual for professors to text you if they have your number, right? And just say, hey, like, how's it going? Of course, everyone's experience is different at every institution, but I would say the relationships with professors are definitely a little less formal in the US, you can expect. But classrooms in general, I would say they're very focused on participation. My professors didn't really talk in class. They expected us to speak. They would give us a lot of different readings before class, expect us to have read them, and then we talk about it. So the professor might give us some questions to discuss, but we had to show up ready with our own questions to ask to class, with our own thoughts and comments. So really, a lot of the grade for my classes just was participation, my ability to speak and think of ideas. Of course, we did have some group projects. We would facilitate some research articles in my classes as well. So sometimes we would just be the professor for the day. Lots of different writing assignments. Usually classes had one big research paper due at the end of every semester. So you do get a lot of writing skills. But there is a really big focus on critical thinking and creativity, because at least in my field and what you will see in other fields, I'm sure as well, we would be expected to read a bunch of articles and kind of reflect on how we could use those in our own workspaces in education. So at the time, I was working with student athletes, and so I would always have to come to class ready to say, hey, this article was really interesting. Here's how I could apply it to my own work that I'm doing with student athlete populations. So sometimes it didn't always really fit, so I had to come up with creative solutions. How could I apply this research to the work that I was currently doing at that time? And so it really, again, graduate school is a lot of thinking, a lot of problem solving, and you are going to really get the opportunities in the US to think of those in the classroom. So again, really, we did all the talking. The professors just kind of sat there and listened. So expect to speak. They want to hear your opinions, your thoughts, your ideas. There's usually not a wrong idea. Some ideas just require more developing, but they still want to hear your ideas. So that's what I really like about the classroom environment in graduate school in the US. So from here, I want to talk a little bit about university life in the US. This is one of my photos from my bachelor's degree school. This is American football. I will talk about this later, but this is our biggest sport everywhere in the US, and it's such a big deal on college campuses. But campus culture in the US. I would say campus culture, of course, we want our students to do well in the classrooms, but we really love hosting events for students. When I was doing my bachelor's degree, my roommate at the time and we would try and find an event every day that had some free food. And usually we could find free food every day of the week because there was always some event going on. Sometimes these events could even be like concerts on campuses, which is crazy. One year we had Kesha, if you know who she is. So they sometimes would have these really big people come perform. I have walked around campus and found like carnival, kind of like a Ferris wheel, like a mini one. They had bungee jumping one time. Um, and then usually more simple, they'll just have like booths set up, some sort of events for holidays, other things. There's a lot of multicultural events for different, usually international students will run those. So there's always something going on our campuses. So we love extracurriculars. There's usually some more academic clubs as well. So if you're looking to get more involved in your field, there are those options too. But usually they're a little more fun and just random events to keep students happy and take a break from studying. Again, diversity, I won't talk that much more about this, but again, our schools are so diverse because the US is just a very diverse place itself. So you're always going to be running into people from every sort of background on your campuses. Student services, we are really big about student affairs in the US. So of course we have all of our basic services such as mental health services, disability services, international student services, career services, but we also tend to have a lot of specialized offices. I would say something that's common on campuses, we have multicultural offices. There are offices for women and gender studies, LGBTQ plus offices, pretty much any office you could think of, we have it. We have veteran student services as well. So yeah, if you have a need, there's probably an office and someone that is getting paid to deal with that specific need. So we're really big about student affairs in the US. There's usually a lot of curriculum flexibility as well. I even found in my master's program, if I found a class that I really wanted to take, and I said, hey, I want to take this class, but I really need this other class for my core credit, could this alternative class count? And they'd be like, okay, yeah, if you have a good reason, sure. So it really depends on the department, but sometimes professors are very flexible with the curriculum. Athletics, like I said, American football is really huge. We have these big stadiums just for the games, but we have a lot of sports. If any sport you can think of, we probably have it on our campuses. It's a big part of university life. Greek life, you might hear this and be really confused. Like, what is Greek life? It has nothing to do with the country, nothing to do with Greece. These are social organizations. Typically, people doing their bachelor's degree are a part of these. Basically, I always say you kind of pay for friendships and pay to meet people, really. They do a lot of parties and like social things. So if you hear people talking about Greek life, talking about rushing and joining a Greek organization, again, nothing to do with the country. They're just social groups. And again, lots of research opportunities, lots of opportunities for student leadership. Because like I said, there's like so many events going on campus. There's always at least like 200 or 300 different student organizations. So there's so many opportunities to get leadership experiences in these spaces around campus. Okay. And lastly, this is my last slide, I promise, and then we will have some time for questions. But I just wanted to highlight some US culture. This could be a whole other presentation in itself. It was really hard to narrow this down. The US, again, is such a diverse place, so there really is no one US culture, but just some things that I've noticed that my international student friends and just students I've worked with have told me. So first, social norms, right? We're very big on being polite. I would say, okay, in Turkey, right, it's very common to hear people honking their car horns here. We don't do that in the US. Maybe in some places, but in Texas, where I'm from, we don't do that because we're like, oh, that's so rude. That's like the rudest thing you could ever do. So you won't hear a lot of car honking in the US. There also, when we walk on the street, even if it's a stranger, we'll just kind of like smile and nod our head at each other. That doesn't happen here either. So I have had to get out of that habit myself. But there is this culture of politeness like that. Small talk, an American might say, oh, how are you doing? And you're just supposed to say, oh, I'm good, how are you? And they'll say, oh, I'm good, have a good day. And then they'll walk away, right? It's just small talk. If somebody asks you how you are, they care. And of course, if you stand there and just say like, oh my God, I'm having a really bad day, I failed my exam, all of this, they'll listen. But that's not usually the purpose of that conversation. It's more just like a greeting, hello, goodbye. So that's small talk. We're really big on small talk. Tipping culture, right? A lot of my friends, we would go out to eat and then they would see the space to leave a tip and they'd be like, we have to tip here? And I'm like, yeah, you have to tip. So if you go out to eat with your friends in the US, be prepared to spend a little extra money than what's on the receipts. That is, it's unfortunate, but in the US, our staff that works at the restaurants, they usually get paid below minimum wage. So tipping helps keep them on like with a livable wage. So I would encourage you to do it. People usually tip about 15 to 20% of what their full order was, but if it's bad service, you can tip 10%. Not all waiters and waitresses are that great. Personal space, here in Turkey, if you greet a close friend, right, usually the hugs, the kisses, like it's very personal. We don't do that in the US. Definitely the first time I had someone to do that to me, I was like, whoa, back up. But now I'm all for it. I love it. But most Americans don't do that. So just be prepared to handshake, give some distance, all of that. Transportation, right? People sometimes assume that Americans are really lazy and we just like buying cars. It is a little true, I will say. But I would say there's some reasons for this. So first off, public transportation is unfortunately not the most reliable in most cities. If you go to big cities like, let's say, New York, Boston, even Honolulu in Hawaii, the public transportation was okay, and I would be okay using it. But in most places, it's really not reliable, unfortunately, or some spaces it doesn't even exist. So I would just be prepared for that a little bit. Of course, we have services like Uber and Lyft, which can kind of take you around. Taxis aren't really as common unless you're in a bigger city. So I wouldn't expect to see taxis in every space in the US. Also, things really aren't that walkable. I love living here because my apartment has a supermarket in the same building. So if I need something at the store, I can just go down the elevator, get something. In the US, unfortunately, that's not usually the case. Growing up, the closest grocery store to me was a 20-minute drive. So it would have taken me at least an hour to walk there one way. And we don't really have good sidewalks in some places. So this is why car culture is really big, right? Things are just so spaced out, and public transportation isn't always as accessible as it might be where you live here. And again, American football, I just always bring this up. I strongly encourage you to, when you know what school you're going to, look up their football team, right? Maybe watch some highlights. For me, honestly, the game is so boring. I am probably the worst American to talk to about American football because I don't really enjoy it, but it is everywhere, especially if you go to states like where I'm from, like Texas, everybody loves football. And I also encourage you to maybe research a couple professional teams. I know this international student who was trying to get a job after graduation and saw that the interviewer had on like a football team shirt. And the student was able to talk about it, make a good connection, and that student got the job. And of course, it's not only because of that conversation, but I strongly think it influenced their decision probably because they were able to make that connection. So I just encourage you maybe learn a little bit about it, at least learn the names of a couple teams so you can be like, oh, like Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys, fantastic, right? You don't have to know anything about the game. But I encourage you to go to the games too, in the US. Like, even if you don't like watching the game, the social environment is usually really fun. That's usually why I go. I don't usually watch the football. Again, I'm probably the worst American to talk to about this, but a lot of my students actually were in athletics in football, so I would go to the games to support them. This picture on the left was actually one of my students that was a volleyball player. So I loved going to athletic games at campuses. So definitely take advantage of those. Athletics events are free for students at the college campus you're at. So I went to so many volleyball games, basketball games, American football games, any sport for free. So take advantage of that. This is just my little overview. So again, I know this was a little fast. It was a lot of information, so I'm gonna leave some time for questions now. I also have my contact information here, in case anyone wants to get in contact with me in the future about any of this. I would be happy to email or talk on LinkedIn more. But I will leave now for questions, so thank you all for listening. I will stop sharing, or I'll leave this up for a minute.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Hailey.
Yeah. Of course. And there was a question I got in the middle of the presentation. So are there any websites or contacts to learn more about the universities in the US? So, because it's hard to find information specifically about fine arts. I would say there are so many websites in the US for students to learn about universities. Even just a simple Google search about like, oh, what are the top universities in the US? It pulls it, there's so many websites that have different rankings. So I would say you could start there by doing that research. Even if you have like specific places that you're interested in going, be like top colleges in this state, top colleges, for example, here, fine arts, right? If you Google those, there's always lists for it. And there's usually a lot of good information from students as well. There's also this website I really like. They have a lot of resources for international students. They're called InnerStride, and they talk a lot about the international student experience in the US. They have a lot of blog posts. So they're a really good resource as well if you want to know more about that. But I would say, yeah, honestly, just Google searching like top universities in the state, top universities for fine arts. There's so many different websites that have information. And then you can just go to that specific university's website, see, like what kind of programs they have, what are the admissions requirements, what kind of courses they offer. So it takes time, but it just takes a lot of Google searches, I would say. So not one website, there are so many websites.
Can I just jump in before the next question? So for the university search, there is also a tab in our website, Fulbright .org.tr called Studying in the US. And in that tab, there's actually a sublink for the useful links. So there's some like search engines that you can use to filter the department that you want to study at and like the state that you want to study in. So you can use those websites. Web sitemizde Fulbright.org.tr'de Amerika'da eğitim sekmesinin altında faydalı linkler diye bir alt sekme bulunuyor. O sekmede istediğiniz filtrelemeleri yapabileceğiniz arama motorları yer alıyor. O arama motorlarına işte istediğiniz bölümü, istediğiniz eyaleti, okulun büyüklüğü gibi bilgileri girdiğinizde size okul listesi verecektir.
Great, thank you for adding that.
No
Yeah, so
problem.
even Fulbright has some resources too on their website. And yeah, Fulbright, they're also really a great resource to ask these questions to as well. Because as if you look at applications and if you have questions about the university experience, Fulbright is so helpful. Even my program, I'm not studying here, I'm working here, but anytime I had a question, they were so helpful at helping me find the information. So definitely reach out to them too if you have questions about that. This question here, so information about master's degree in social sciences and working as a research assistant. So again, there's so many opportunities in social sciences depending on what you're wanting to do, whether this be more psychology-based, sociology, even more like social work, any sort of social science that you're looking for, it would be available somewhere. Typically, to find research assistant programs, there's several ways you could do that. First, I would say get connected with the professors in that institution. So a life hack as you're applying for any graduate program in whatever field, definitely reach out to professors beforehand. Say, hey, I'm applying to your program. I was maybe reading your research on this area and I thought it was so interesting. I would love to connect and talk about it sometime. This actually helps because professors love to talk about their work. They love connecting with students. So this is a life hack in general. But you could also talk with the professors and say, hey, like I'm interested in studying at your institution. What opportunities for maybe a research assistantship might you have? And usually they will say what opportunities might be available, what kind of research they're doing. So this is one way to find research assistant positions. I would also say most university websites have a job posting board for students, and they will talk about all the jobs that they have on campus, and usually they'll put those research assistant or teaching assistant jobs there. So you can also kind of search those job boards, but I would say probably both do that, or maybe start there just to see if they have stuff posted. But if you don't see anything, definitely reach out to the professors because they usually are really happy to give that information because they're always looking for students that are eager to learn and ready for those opportunities. So both in social sciences and really in any field that you want to study in. That's my advice on how to find those. Any other questions?
Başka sorusu olan var mı?
If not, that is okay. It's a lot of information, so you're probably processing right now and thinking. But this recording will be available to y'all. It will be available soon. Again, I'm also going to send the slides. So if y'all would like the slides that I created, you can either email me or Fulbright about that, and they also will have access to those. But also, like I shared my information. So if you have any other questions about what it's like studying in the US, I am so happy to connect and answer them. But thank you again, everyone, for listening today. Oh, a question. Okay. Is it easy to reach out to a university? Yes, very easy. Again, they love talking to students. So I would just say, depending on what you are wanting to ask, there's information like emails for every sort of professor, every sort of staff usually that are posted on the page. So if you're looking to talk with professors, if you go to the department websites, they always have their emails listed there, so you can contact them through that. If you're looking to contact any sort of student services, any of that, their emails are always posted there. And I would say 99% of the time, they're very good about answering fast. If they don't answer, you can always just send a follow-up email and just say, hey, I emailed about this a few days ago. I just wanted to follow up. And then usually they answer 100% of the time. So they're very easy to contact. They also have phone numbers listed, though I know it might be a little harder to call people from Turkey, but if you have connections in the US, they can definitely call for you and they will answer the phones usually. So overall, they're very accessible. Information is out there. So if you need to email someone, their emails are usually on the website. You just have to find it. Good question. Any others? Hmm. Ooh, that is a good question. Software engineering. Ooh, of course, I would say there's some technical institutions that typically overall have good engineering programs. I don't have specific universities to recommend right now, but there's lots of different technical universities that would have more software engineering programs. I would say big city, like look for cities also with like big tech hubs, right? So like, for example, top of my head, of course, I think San Francisco, right? Because they have a lot of different software engineering, software development opportunities. So outside the classroom, you may have an easier time finding some internship opportunities to work. So I would probably just say like look for schools that also have a lot of those opportunities in the community because sometimes they also invite people that work at those companies to come speak at the universities because they're in close distance. So you'll get to hear from people that are in software engineering fields, in those technical fields. But, again, I would just encourage you to do some research. Some Google searches are usually a good place to start. But yes, typically you also will have to take some sort of TOEFL or IELTS, and have a certain score in English. Every institution is different in the scores that they require. So I would just encourage you when you find your institutions that you're interested in to just research their admission requirements and see which tests they accept, and what scores they're looking for. Some institutions are starting to accept more exams as well. So you can see those on their websites. Besides just TOEFL and IELTS, I know Duolingo has an exam that some universities are starting to accept. There's a couple others, so I would just say once you know which universities you want to apply for, then you can look what exams they take and what scores they require. Good questions too. Any others?
Başka sorusu olan var mıydı? I think that's it.
Okay, great. So again, I'll say if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me or contact Fulbright. We are all happy to help. I wish you all luck as you are starting this journey of thinking about attending school and maybe hopefully applying. The Fulbright programs, again, are a really awesome way to get to the US and study. But again, there are so many opportunities as well. So I just encourage you to do your research. So thank you all for listening today. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I wish you all the best of luck.